Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Dental Disruptors podcast. I am Jake Larson, your host, and my co-host Clint here again for another episode. And we've got a new friend, Janet. It's pronounced Hagerman, right? Am I pronouncing that correctly? Yep. Janet Hagerman. We just are meeting Janet for the first time. We've been connected through some mutual connections in the industry. And this is a really fun episode for us because it's a little bit different than what we've done in the past. We have a lot of different technology companies that are on here. We talk a lot about technology, but we don't get to talk a lot about the clinical side and some of the clinical impacts. And Janet is going to bring that to our podcast episode today. So we're really excited to learn a little bit about Janet and some disruptive best practices and in a positive and negative way, how this is impacting dentistry. So Janet, before we dive into all that, it's hard to not get ahead of ourselves. Clint and I, getting to know Janet before this, we just wanted to dive in. So let's start learning about you and how you got into dental. Give us a little bit of background on who you
Sure.
are and where you come from.
Sure. Thanks, Jake and Clint. It's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, my background started many years ago as a clinical dental hygienist. So I practiced in solo practices, Perio, Pedo, General. Then I did full practice coaching and some hygiene specific coaching back in the days when there really wasn't any hygiene coaching. As a matter of fact, DSOs, it was very early days. They had a terrible reputation. And I was invited to become the director of hygiene for a 100 plus practice. We didn't even call them DSOs back then. It was just a group. And I went not thinking I would stay very long. I thought, if I stay for 6 months, it'll look good on my resume. I didn't know what I was doing. So 6 months turned into 6 years. And basically what happened was they did not know what to do with me, but they knew they needed help with their hygiene department. And so they asked me to come on and be the director of hygiene. And it was intimidating at first because I didn't understand corporate dentistry. But as I learned my way around, I realized I had this blank palette that I could literally build what I wanted to. So I built that hygiene department from the ground up, created some, wonderful teams. After that, I was doing coaching. A lot of dentists asked me, when you come to our practice, can you please teach my team how to sell dentistry? I know dentistry is walking out the door and I could use some help myself. But the thing is, whatever you do, don't call it selling dentistry because we don't like that. So I ended up taking some advice from my good friend Paul Homily, I said, what are your top 3 strategies for success? And he said, write a book, write a book, write a book. So I wrote a book called Selling Dentistry, Ethically, Elegantly, and Effectively, and focused on that for a few years. And then I thought back about the DSO space and how much more of an influence I could have by working with DSOs. So now, in addition to case acceptance, I've sort of widened the parameter a little bit and work with emerging groups that need hygiene help, but it's not in the budget to hire a director of hygiene. So I'm now a fractional Chief Hygiene Officer. So I go into these young groups and help them identify potential leaders that I can groom for them, but also set up that system like I did for that early first DSO that I worked for. So I'm sort of between case acceptance and that broadens into all the other systems because it's not a silo. There are a lot of different systems and folks that all, hygiene is not an isolated island, and nor is case acceptance, kind of in a nutshell.
I want to hear a little bit more when you became the director of hygiene for this. You said it was about 100 location DSO, and you had an empty canvas. What did you decide to do? Like, how did you decide? Like, were you visiting all these locations and training all their people? And it seems like that's a really busy job, especially when you're starting from scratch.
Well, that's a good question because we had the first corporate meeting that I went to with the leadership team, and I naively announced my intention to visit every one of these 100 offices, which never happened because they're scattered all over.
It's too many, right? They're all over the US or whatever.
Well, they were all over Florida, Georgia, and Virginia. And some of them
Yep.
were rather closely located, so you could hit maybe 3 or 4 in a day, but some of them were out in the middle of nowhere.
Mm.
So it was difficult. So the first thing we did was we created a periodontal program, a best in class periodontal program. And at the same time, I was working on creating, we had, I think, 4 or 5 regions. Each region had maybe 30 so practices. So I worked on creating a team of clinical hygiene assistants, and each one was responsible for a region. So we would have our meetings, and then that would get filtered down to the region that they were responsible for. So they were the ones that would actually go in the office. I would go in as many as I could, but the difference between taking somebody who's clinically really, really good and helping coach them up to a point, and I had some great coaches in my life, to a point where your corporate skills are different from your clinical skills. It's a different skill set. So I had to learn how do you manage without getting in front of every single person personally? How do you develop a reputation for empathy and taking care of your team without having the luxury of sitting there face to face? So that was always good, and I'm always for face-to-face team meetings, but having this team of 4 other mini-me's, if you will, to go out and spread the word, and my team was amazing. Each one of them gone on to be a rock star in the DSO space on their own. But to be able to have that team uh, um, uh, transparency and communication, and then to be able to filter that down to their leaders and the actual people, what I call the geese that are laying the golden eggs, are hardworking clinicians that are in there doing the work to get the messages down to them. So, and that's through meetings. And of course, now we have things like Zoom, which makes it easier to keep and connect to. But to answer your question, I would say creating a team first, and then grooming leadership, teaching leadership right from the start. So everybody begins to act like a leader. And then beginning one by one on the different clinical systems, Perio being the first one that we started, with over 50 to 70% of the population that still has some level of periodontal disease. It's crucial.
Yeah. What a cool background. She came from, imagine the amount of learning that happens when you're thrown into that many offices so fast. You're just seeing so many things that you probably accelerated your learning 100 times.
Oh, huge. I like to say it was like getting a drink of water from a fire hydrant. The first day
Yeah.
there was no onboarding,
Yeah.
none. It didn't exist. I didn't even know enough to ask, am I supposed to get a company computer? Am I going to have an office
Wow.
at the corporate headquarters? So, yeah, it was a huge learning experience, but it was worth it. Like everything in life, you take the lessons and learn.
So one of the things that stood out to both Clint and I when we learned about you was the CHO title, and I know that that's not necessarily the official title or whatever, but the Chief Hygiene Officer.
Mm-hmm.
I've never heard that term before. You probably have copyrighted it, but I want to just learn what does that entail. I mean, I'm sure that there's some things that people might take off
Yeah.
from that are obvious, but what is a CHO?
Good question. Well, it stands for Chief Hygiene Officer. But what you see, of course, you've heard this before. You see one DSO, you've seen one DSO. They're all different business models. But, we all know what a CEO is,
Mm-hmm.
and a COO, CFO, Chief Financial Officer, CMO, Chief Marketing Officer. Hopefully, this doesn't always happen, but hopefully we have a Chief Clinical Officer, a dentist who is the clinical leader, who is the one we go to when we need to develop a standard of care for dentistry.
Mm-hmm.
That would be need to be a dentist, the chief dental officer. But I've never heard of a chief hygiene officer. And that's missing. It should be there. Now, we are called different things. It could be the director of dental hygiene. That's what I was known as. It could be the VP of hygiene. So I decided that being a fractional chief hygiene officer would be the best way to position what I'm now starting to do. So just because I go into a DSO and train somebody doesn't mean that that person will be a chief hygiene officer. They may decide to call that person the director of dental hygiene or a VP of hygiene, however they're structured.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
I love how it frames it with something that people are familiar with, like a
Mhm.
fractional CFO or something
Yeah.
like that. I think it's I
And
think it's really smart.
fractional C-suite positions are starting to be trending now. I
Yeah.
don't know if you've noticed, but in dentistry, there are more and more fractional different positions that are there because it serves a great purpose for these small growing DSOs.
Yeah.
And I did not trademark that. I have seen one
You
other
need to,
person.
Janet. Oh,
I don't think
it'll be
that's
yours.
trademarkable. I have started to see, I think, one other person that identified herself as a
That's really cool.
a CHO. Yeah.
So let's
So
get
you,
down to the nuts and bolts. No, go. Okay, Clint. One more question. One more.
well, I just wanted to hear like, so you think that the hygiene portion of it is so important that there should be someone in the room up at the executive level, um, providing input and helping guide the hygiene across the whole organization. So a DSO is a set or group practices. You feel like it's so important that needs to be there. Does that sound correct?
No, it's not so important that it needs to be there. It's critical.
Love it.
Yeah.
I mean, hygiene is the foundation
Yeah.
of a dental practice.
Well-
It brings our patients back in for recare. It assures if we do it correctly, that we have consistent patient flow. If it's done correctly, hygiene, not only do they handle the hygiene end, we save lives by treating periodontal disease. We know about the oral systemic connection now. We save lives by identifying and treating periodontal disease. We save lives by doing oral cancer screenings on every single person. So it's very important, and a good hygienist is going to be looking for restorative opportunities to give to the dentist. So when the dentist comes in as a hygienist, I'm going to be saying, Dr. Larson, I noticed several areas in Mrs. Jones' mouth here. Could you please take a look at these? I've already talked to her about some of the possibilities. So when you come in, I've already prepped the patient for your restorative work. 1/3 industry stats, 1/3 of the doctor's restorative work should be coming from hygiene.
Yeah, that's
So there's
awesome.
many reasons why. I mean, hygiene is critical. And so that should be one of the first things we look at. Who's our dental leader and who's our hygiene leader? And also for them to work together in partnership. Too often there's not a partnership between the dentist and the hygienist. So, and I have protocols for that. They're that are very successful.
I love that. You even talked. I mean, you wrote the book on selling dentistry, but anecdotally, when
Mhm.
I go to the dentist and the hygiene specialist, hygienist tells me things before the dentist gets there, it's almost like having a second opinion.
Of
And so it's
course.
not just the dentist that comes in and says it, but it's like, oh, the hygienist already pointed it out. I mean, she saw it too. It must be very obvious. And then when the dentist comes in and confirms it, it's like, okay, yeah, I probably
Mhm.
need that work done. So I love that. That's very cool.
Mhm. And now with AI, and we have this radiographic diagnostic platforms that are now you have a third opinion.
Yep.
So I want to take a step back because as everyone listening knows, our podcast is called the Dental Disruptors podcast,
Yeah.
right? So I want to take a step back and just talk about the impact, the disruption that poor case acceptance has in a practice. And maybe this is just like par for the course. People know it and maybe they don't. But Janet, tell us from your experience seeing so many different offices, seeing so many different approaches to this, writing the book on it, what is the actual impact that case acceptance is having in practices and for patients today?
Yeah, it's a huge disruptor, Jake. It's foundational. So the first thing that happens is our patients are not getting the care that they need. Now, statistics tell us, dental economic surveys, 30 to 50% of patients do not accept treatment. 30 to 50%. 50% is patients of record, and 30% is patients, 30% is patient of record, 50% is new patients. 30% of the patients that we already know that are patients and they're not accepting our treatment. 50% of new patients come in and leave and don't get treatment. And they've been diagnosed, so they're walking around with disease in their mouth that we've already diagnosed. So those are pretty serious. So our patients are not getting the treatment that they need. The amount of revenue that's being left on the table is huge, and any practice can easily look that up in their practice management software and see what is the dollar amount of untreated treatment plans, unfulfilled treatment plans that we have in our company. So
why is that, Janet? What's your opinion on the primary causes of people not accepting their case or their treatment that's been outlined?
Well, there's not one primary cause. There's many causes. First of all, it's a team effort. And I think too often we think of case acceptance as one particular person. But it's a team effort. The whole team needs to have a mindset of selling dentistry is not a bad word. It's not a bad thing. How do we do it? What are our beliefs about how we present and how we talk to our patients? And then every person on the team needs to do their job. One of the things I talk about is we talk too much in dentistry. We talk too much. We need to ask better open-ended questions and then listen to our patient's story so that we can help connect the treatment that they need, why they came in, with that patient's needs. So most buying decisions are made with emotion and justified with logic. That's marketing surveys. Many show us that. And it's clearly obvious when you watch practically any TV commercial. Okay? We buy on emotion and then we justify it with logic. Now, we have the left and right side of our brains. One side is very artistic and emotional. The other side is very logical. So where do we live in dentistry? I mean, we spend our whole life in this little box, black, in millimeters, right? So when it comes time to explain something to somebody, we give them all that clinical information, and quite frankly, they don't care. They care about pain. They care about how am I going to pay for it. They care about I don't want to be hurt. So we don't approach them emotionally from the start. I teach mindset. And then I teach, what are the kind of conversations we need to have? How do we answer these questions? What are good open-ended questions? These are all, the technology that we have now is amazing. And I love it, love it, love it. And as we grow more and more technology, we need to also grow our soft skills. Our soft skills are huge. So you take somebody who spends all their life right on our devices, communicating with emojis, and then we expect them to sit down and have a face-to-face conversation with somebody about thousands of dollars worth of treatment. And it's unrealistic to think that they can do that effectively. So it's a whole team effort. The whole team needs to be totally clued in. Communication, all the other systems that if they are disrupted, they're not going to support. So communication, tracking, keeping up with, where are we? How do we even know if we're successful? What is our case acceptance? If the national average is 30 to 50%, what is ours? What is our company's? So knowing how to look at KPIs, how to interpret those, how are we consistent throughout our different locations? Otherwise, we get what I call the culture du jour. Whoever happens to be there, whatever their communication style is, that's the style. So there are so many different aspects that go into that systematize. So once you get those systems in place, all that works to help assure better case acceptance, which keeps your family of dentistry alive, the team alive and engaged, and the patients too. So it's a huge disruptor across the board when we don't have good case acceptance, and it's part of many systems and contributes to the other systems.
I love that word systems, right, Janet? Because I mean, I've never been on the clinical side, right? So how often do you go into a practice and there is a legitimate system and culture around hygiene versus it just, like you said, the culture du jour?
Like that culture du jour. That's trademark on that, Janet. That's a good one. Culture du jour.
Yeah, I mean, if people aren't putting an emphasis on systematizing it, something that's so critical, I would imagine that it's very maybe, or maybe I shouldn't say very inefficient, but not as efficient as it could be otherwise. So how often are you seeing that versus having a very good process that's been defined?
Well, I see it most of the time because that's what I'm doing. I'm fixing that. So most of the practices that I go into, if they have a culture, it's often benign milk toast culture. We want to do what's best for our patients, and we love technology and we're ethical. It was like everybody says that. I mean, that's your basis. What makes you stand out? What are you really passionate about? And then do you live your culture? It's not just having it on the wall, it's living it. So if their culture is already tight, and I mean, there are plenty of companies that it is, and they live their culture. They don't need me. I'll give you a perfect example, and that's Smile. Is it Smile Partners? Yeah, out west.
Okay.
Smiles for everyone. That's their motto. Smiles for everyone. And I was there talking to their team one time, and I said, I just love this concept of smiles for everyone. And the gal who asked me to come out and speak, who was one of my original Chief Hygiene assistants, said, well, Janet, it's not just the patients. Smiles for everyone means every decision we make, it has to be good for the patient, but it also has to be good for the team, us, and it also has to be good for the company, and it also has to be good for our investors. And I just thought that is so cool. And this company now, they do worldwide work. They go to communities all over the world and help, underserved communities. So 3 quick little words. So that's the kind of thought to go into a culture that everybody in the company can stand behind and you support with every decision that you make.
I love that so much. I mean, Jake and I both came from Weave, and culture
Hmm.
was such a big part of that company. And so,
Yeah.
we keep finding like-minded people like you, Janet, that we just really see eye to eye with. So I love hearing this, and I love, you can
Hmm.
feel the difference when you go into a
Oh
dental
yeah.
office that has a good culture. It's just almost immediate, even from
Oh
just the
yeah.
person greeting you at the desk to the experience at hygiene to talking with the dentist. The whole experience is just better.
Hmm. But to both of your point, how disruptive is it not to have good case acceptance? To me, it's like an indication of other issues and other problems. Um, and how many practices or companies do have a need for that? Well, a lot of them, because as these dentists come out of school, they get I heard an interesting statistic that a majority of dentists come out of school, they have no intention of practicing. I mean, they'll practice for a couple of years, but they literally go to dental school because they want to own a group, which I thought was interesting. But because there really is no business model, you have dentists that just are wanting to acquire more and more quickly without solid systems in place first. It's just so tempting to grab up more offices, and then you end up with chaos, with a mishmash.
So, Janet, we've kind of dabbled in some of the solutions that you've
Hmm.
outlined. You've kind of shared some tidbits here and there. What would you say like, are there technology components that you would say are part of the solution? Is it all culture? What advice would you give someone that's kind of looking at themselves in the mirror and saying, okay, we need to do a better job at this? Where would they start? What are some of these systems that you would say they should start to implement?
I would say get a good coach. I will give you one idea that is great. You know, Charles Mosier has a wonderful platform. It's called Dental Science Alliance. And I would recommend that for anybody, because what it is, you sign up for a very minimal fee and you get the opportunity to access, I think it's twice a month for an hour or a half hour. They have coaches in every different system. They have financial coaches. They have a hygiene coach. They have marketing coaches. So, and anybody on your team can access those different coaches. So that's one place I would start with, that, to start getting tidbits of coaching from different systems. And then I would sit down and look at a corporate structure and say, these are all the places that you need. You need marketing, you need an attorney, you need a financial person, we need to pay people, we need a dental person to lead our dentists, we need to where are we and what is our plan to fill in those buckets? And sometimes, you know, the dentist may end up being the owner, the CEO, and, you know, the CMO for a while, until they grow big enough to have separate departments. But just to get a good understanding of what is an HR, human resources, that is so important. And we can outsource that as well. So often I see practices, they don't even have an office manual. If they do, it's not compliant. And that triples down to, how do you recruit? How do you hire? How do you monitor people's behavior clinically as well as just professionally? And if we need to let people go, how do we do that in an ethical way and also a compliant way? So that's a huge system. Those are the kinds of things that need to be in place before we start gobbling up more offices.
Oh, you're good. Well, Janet, this has been fascinating. I think that it's been eye-opening to me to put this emphasis on the hygiene. I've always known that hygiene was like the funnel, right, that keeps the office alive. But I don't think I've ever heard someone, you know, with the dedicated mindset to standardize that process, to really systematize it. And I'm sure that people are doing it. But if there are people out there that have really enjoyed hearing this, they want to get in touch with you, they want to learn more, what would be the best way, Janet, for them to get in contact with you?
They can email me directly. It's my name, Janet, at janethagerman.com. My website is janethagerman.com.
Perfect.
Yeah,
That's
I'm
good.
pretty active on LinkedIn too. So if you're on LinkedIn,
Okay.
comment and check in with me on LinkedIn.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Well,
So great.
yeah, so nice to have
Thank
you,
you so
Janet.
much. This has been so much fun talking to both of you. Great questions.
Yeah, it's been really, really fun. Thanks so much. And we appreciate everybody for listening. Please take time to follow Janet on LinkedIn. Reach out to her. Conversation, I'm sure, would be beneficial no matter how in-depth the relationship gets. But Janet, thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.